So I want to start with this idea of text sets and why we might spend time thinking about providing multiple text to support a key concept. So I have up here something that could be a key concept in lots of different classes. So say you're in a culinary arts class and you want students to learn about fondant. Well, you could just sort of show them a piece of fondant, so you could have sort of the real thing right in front of them. But you also want students to have a couple of different ways to think about this concept, because fondant is a tool that you can use for decorating. It's a tool that you can use to add stability to desserts. And so you want, if this is a key concept in your class, you want a few different ways for kids to think and talk about it. So you might have lots of images that support students imagining how fondant is used and what it can be used for. You might have videos of people working with fondant to show how it works and all the different ways you might work it. You might also have magazines where fondant is featured or discussed, because magazines are really a different style of writing and they're a different style of presenting images with text. And so if students have an easy time making sense of the text in a magazine, they can be reading about this key concept in a way that would be different from learning about it visually through a movie, which would be different from learning about it through the text of a textbook, which would be different from learning about it by reading student writing, writing their own and sharing student writing that relates to uses of fondant, or things to be careful of when you're using or making fondant, or different things about the history and why fondant exists and why these ingredients. You might have an ingredient list. You might have something about how it's made. And so instead of having a lesson on fondant where you essentially verbally explain everything there is to know, you have an entire set of resources that you make available or that you use together in class or some combination, so that there are lots of pathways in for different kinds of readers, for different kinds of writers to be interacting with the print that surrounds the concept of fondant and also with the very thing itself. So another example might be from an English class setting, and pretend that you are beginning the novel Frankenstein. Well, one obvious text that you're going to be using is the novel itself. But that novel doesn't have to be the only text around. Students can also be looking at other artistic representations of Frankenstein to get a sense of different ways people have imagined him. They might look at video representations and how different characters have embodied and taken on, different actors have embodied and taken on the characters that go along with that story. You might look at alternate versions. Not to read the entire thing in 3 different versions, but to see how people have shifted or changed things. You might show students a paragraph or 2 of a fan fiction version so that you can talk about how that text has been represented by people who are really interested in it. You might engage with a review that tells students how other people have critiqued or enjoyed or not enjoyed the text. You might look at some student writing about Frankenstein from past years, or you might have students write their emerging ideas and share those ideas. But either way, you're collecting this sort of set of texts, which might also include like a graphic novel version. Not so that you read Frankenstein essentially 8 different ways, but so that the novel itself is surrounded by texts that offer ways to come in. So maybe you don't know a lot of the vocabulary you need to understand chapter 1. Well, you can listen to your teacher define it for you out loud, or you could use some of these alternative and often very supportive contexts to develop the background knowledge, develop the context to make good inferences when you are reading what can be a challenging text. And the richer we make the set of resources around that novel, the more opportunities students have to develop the background knowledge and the vocabulary and the interest to persist when they're reading the chapters in class or for homework. So the same thing would be true in a science class. If you're talking about fingerprints, then obviously you might show a picture of what fingerprints look like, but you also might show representations of fingerprints on a fingerprinting machine, different technology that's used to do that, so that students have a sense of where this comes in handy or where they might see fingerprinting being used, what it might be used for. You might show different tools for creating it. And you also might show clips of videos that show the process of finding fingerprints or show the different matchups and how fingerprints are used for different things. And then you might show text from your textbook that is kind of explanatory, but you also might show text from a novel, or text from a newspaper, or text from a internet website or blog, or text from a diagram of a crime scene, so that students not only see what this concept of fingerprint is and how it's used, but also how people would be interacting with it in the field, in different fields, and all of the different things that this means. So you'll notice that the text that around this concept of fingerprints isn't all different books. It's lots of ways of imagining and making connections between the key concept for your content area. So when we think about text sets, we're really thinking about building the world around a concept so that students are making really rich, deep connections with the language, with the reasons for thinking about and using that content, with the context in which that content is important. And that is one of the ways that we can use literate activities like making sense of a video and making sense of a new set of tools and how you read and interact with those tools for content aims. So you'll notice across the board actually that we're not looking for 10 different books about fingerprints. We're looking for lots of different ways to interact with fingerprints or Frankenstein or fondant. So to summarize, the basic idea around presenting text sets is to have multiple access points to maximize conversation, so we have lots of ways of thinking and talking about key concepts, and lots of different modes of representation so that students can get used to accessing information for the first time in whatever way is most comfortable for them, but also engage and interact with all the different modes of representation so that they're also aware of and fluent with all of the different ways that you might present or communicate about these different key concepts from your content area.